a new congressional district map, a new congressional primary election date, plus word from the U.S. Supreme Court. Welcome to Locker Room Talk. I'm Donna Martinez. An amazing story developing here in North Carolina. Lots of moving parts. We want to tell you exactly what we know right now and how it impacts you. To do that, I'm joined by my Carolina Journal colleague, Managing Editor Rick Henderson. Rick, we heard from the U.S. Supreme Court late Friday evening. What'd they say?
U.S. Supreme Court said that the current lawsuit that's going on in U.S. District Court challenging the maps that have been in effect since 2011 for congressional districts in North Carolina are no good. So what happened was a special session of the General Assembly called last week to draw new maps, drew new maps, and now the courts will look at them.
Okay, that's the federal court now that has to look at this newly drawn map.
Right.
Do we know what that court might say or when we might hear?
We don't know what they or when they will hear or when we'll hear anything from them. We're pretty sure they're going to turn these down. I would almost guarantee you that these maps are not going to survive. And the reason they're
Why is that?
Well, the reason they're not going to survive is because the first maps were rejected by the courts because of a lawsuit filed claiming that these maps were drawn with race as the predominant factor in determining the composition of congressional districts. Last year, the Supreme Court issued a ruling in an Alabama case saying that race no longer can be the primary determinant in drawing maps in voting rights states, basically the states of the Old South. Well, this General Assembly went back, and what the General Assembly did was say, okay, since we don't know how much race is too much, we'll just not include race at all. What we're going to do is we're going to draw maps that guarantee the best chance for us to maintain the current partisan composition of our congressional delegation. 10 Republicans, 3 Democrats, race is not a factor at all. The other thing that Alabama decision said was that we can consider partisanship, but not too much. Again, this is a departure from earlier Supreme Court precedent. And so by basically ruling out race entirely and basing it entirely on partisan composition of the districts, there's a very good chance that the courts are going to say these maps are no good also.
All right, so we await word from the federal district court on that. What happens, though, with the congressional primary? There was some action by the General Assembly.
Yes, as part of sending these maps to Congress, you have to now, since you have new maps, you have to have a new filing period. You have to have a period of time in which people can actually file for office, can ask for absentee ballots, can ask for all sorts of other things dealing with this particular congressional primary. So they moved the primary date to June 7th. And if these maps stand, then the congressional primary will be June 7th, and there will be no runoffs for any races statewide so that the state doesn't have to hold a second or, in this case, third election.
But, Rick, what if you've already voted in the congressional primary because we're within the absentee balloting period?
At the time we're recording this, there have been more than 10,000 absentee ballots mailed and several thousand cast, and those who have voted in congressional elections, their votes will not be counted. Their votes will also remain private because those become public records after the election, typically speaking. Those votes will remain private, and what will happen will be that you will be asked to send for a whole new absentee ballot to vote in the congressional primary, which now is scheduled for June 7th.
What if you were running in a congressional district and now find that you don't live in the district? Now, we know, of course, North Carolina law says that you don't have to actually live in the district that you're trying to represent, but you've had candidates running for months thinking they're running for a particular office.
Right. The new map moved the 13th congressional district of 100-plus miles to the west. So George Holding, who now represents that district, lives nowhere near it. And he has already said that he is going to file in the 2nd congressional district, which is also represented by a Republican, Renee Elmers, and run against Renee Elmers. You have the 12th congressional district, which was the I-85 district that stretched from Greensboro to Charlotte. Now it's entirely contained in Mecklenburg County. Its representative, Alma Adams, is from Greensboro, so she lives nowhere near her district. She's going to run for re-election in that district, but she may get some challengers from some people who are closer to Charlotte.
Let's recap for folks what we know. We're waiting to hear from the federal court on the map that has been submitted by the General Assembly. At this point, we're thinking the congressional primary would be put off to June 7th. And if you've already voted, then your vote would not be tallied because there would be a new election, a new congressional primary.
Right, and you're going to, if you vote any other race you voted in, your vote will be counted. Now, the other complicating factor here is that there's a separate lawsuit in federal court right now challenging the legislative districts using the same rationale that were used in the case that the state just lost. it's always possible that the courts could say, you know what, these legislative districts are no good either. So we've got to go back and draw a whole new set of legislative maps. And again, I don't put that beyond the realm of possibility.
So as you and I are talking, though, every other race would still continue to be on March 15th, the
Correct.
primary election. We're just talking about the congressional primary here, that at this
That's right.
point is moved to June 7th. Now, one thing I do want to tell you is that the map, the new map we're talking about, right here, you can find this at carolinajournal.com. On the home page, there's a story written by Carolina Journal reporter Dan Way. It includes this map. You can take a look and see what district you now fall into, at least as of today. Rick Henderson, managing editor of Carolina Journal. Thank you, Rick.
Thank
you, folks. We're going to continue to be giving you these updates through Locker Room Talk. You can go to carolinajournal.com and see those updates throughout the day. Have a good one.